Okay, so when we look at language in isolation, what we are actually looking at are three different aspects of it. We're looking at content, we're looking at form, and we're looking at use. So, content refers to, again, meaning, syntax, and the sequence of the language. The form is the modality, the formation, speech, signs, print, or AAC. And we'll discuss AAC later on in the semester, but it does stand for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. And then we're also looking at how language is used within a social setting, pragmatics, and conversation. So, again, when we're looking at language, we're also looking at two strands, receptive and expressive. So, receptive language refers to the student understanding the communication of others, and then expressive is the opposite. It's the ability to communicate your own thoughts and ideas. So, I am going to play a video of a classroom where students have to really use their receptive language. And I want you to, as you're watching the video, just take down a couple of notes in terms of what you notice that students need in order to understand the classroom routine. Okay, so the question for you guys is what types of receptive language supports do the students need to have in order to be able to understand the directions? Obviously, the students need to have very well developed receptive skills in order to understand the multiple directions that were being given during that time. And you can tell that the students understand for the most part because they are doing what the teacher is asking. Other students who maybe don't have as strong receptive language skills could be looking to their partners to see what they should be doing. Now, here's another example of a very impacted receptive language in a student with Down syndrome. And again, I want you to notice the strategies that are being implemented to help support this very significant deficit for the student. So, what are some strategies that you guys noticed were being implemented to support this area of need for the student? A couple that I can list off is really providing that wait time for the student. Wait time, or also known as processing time, is giving the student basically processing time to process the information that they are being told to follow or whatever it may be. Usually it takes someone typical, anywhere between 1 to 2 seconds after hearing something to process the information and then follow it up with an action. It can take students with autism up to 14 seconds to process the information before they're able to follow along with whatever direction they are being given. If you cut that processing time short, then what ends up happening is that you are basically restarting the clock for the student, and therefore, whatever they were processing gets lost and then they have to start over again. So for this student, the paraprofessional actually did a really nice job of employing that processing time, that wait time. In addition to that, you notice that the speech and language pathologist who was, behind the camera, she was the one that gave the paraprofessional additional prompting in terms of like use a gestural prompt, and go ahead and point to what you want him to do, pair that with the verbal directions, and that seemed to be a very good strategy for the student. As we saw, he was able to put those peaches inside the lunchbox. Okay, so overall, signs of receptive language challenges. Students often have a difficult time understanding sentences or following directions. They have a difficult time with abstract language and acquiring new vocabulary. Okay, that's how receptive language is manifested within the classroom. Now, expressive language, which is the other component of language, is all about being able to articulate your thoughts and ideas to communicate a message. So here is a video of a student expressing language, specifically how to solve a math problem. Never mind, let me try that again. So again, this student is using her very well developed expressive language skills to be able to go ahead and discuss how to solve that problem. Okay, so how do you know if a student is displaying challenges with expressive language? Well, a couple of red flags are if you are noticing that the student is having a difficult time formulating and expressing their thoughts. You will notice that there may be challenges with grammatically correct sentences, or they're simply using declarative statements instead of using more complex sentences as they become older. Oftentimes, you will also see that they will omit words, or there's errors of agreement in writing. Okay. Pragmatic language, on the other hand, is the language that we use during social interaction use of language. And, again, many students, especially those with autism, pragmatic language is one that they struggle with, and they require explicit instruction in the area of pragmatic language. Um, this is a video that shows. It's not very long, but it does show how the strong skill of having pragmatic language helps to support friendships. Again, it's all about um, your body language and just engaging in socially appropriate behaviors and interactional use of language. Okay, pragmatic language typically involves three areas, and it involves using the language for different purposes, changing the language according to the needs of a listener or situation, and following rules for conversations. Those are the three areas. Sorry, those are the three areas of pragmatic language. Okay, again, if you are noticing that a student is having a difficult time using language to interact with others, or they are starting, maintaining, or leaving an interaction at inappropriate times, or are using language for limited functions, then they're probably having difficulty with pragmatic language. These are the areas that speech language pathologists would focus on to support their access to the curriculum and their social skill development. Okay, so again, speech language services, which is a related service, will focus on receptive problems. And again, they will provide increased processing time, wait time, so the student can process the information in order to follow through with a task or action. They will also provide ideas on how to make language much more concrete, either using pictures or writing or any other multimodal approach. With expressive challenges, a speech language pathologist will look at the use of basic signs or AAC, which I said augmentative or alternative communication devices. And then there's also that pragmatics piece that speech language pathologists would focus on supporting the student's social skills. Okay, now we're going to head on over to OHI. And you may notice this if you're already in the classroom or if you're a case carrier, you may notice sometimes that the OHI eligibility is on the IEP. And OHI stands for Other Health Impairment. And it really, I don't want to say like it's a catch all, but it does really include students who maybe have chronic or acute health challenges that are adversely affecting their educational performance. So, what are some of those chronic or acute health problems? It could be ADD or ADHD, diabetes, epilepsy, heart conditions, hemophilia, all of these different conditions that are on this list. All of these can definitely have adverse effects on the ability for the student to access the curriculum. Okay, so I want to focus in this section of the lecture on ADHD and ADD, and I want you to think about the following: when you tell a student to pay attention or to focus, what are you really telling them? Because in reality, if we break this down, to tell a student to pay attention or to focus is not an effective way to help them do this. And that's simply because it is very abstract. What does pay attention look like? What does focus look like? Um, so I just really want you guys to kind of be cognizant, that if you're in the classroom and you tell a student to pay attention, your best bet for getting that student to pay attention would be to more likely describe what it looks like to pay attention. So please have, be in your seat, have your notebook out, have your book out, whatever it may be, be descriptive in terms of that. Okay, so again, ADHD is not the inability to pay attention. ADD, they're not the inability to pay attention. Okay, it is more so having the inability or difficulty of screening out external stimuli. And I think many people have that misconception about ADD and ADHD that, people are not able to pay attention, and it's not necessarily true. It's just they are it, but they're having a really difficult time focusing on what is pertinent right now. Okay. So before we move forward, I just want to go over the ADHD ADD timeline because I just think it's interesting, especially because this eligibility, this condition, it is often a subject of criticism, and many have come to refer to it as a trendy diagnosis. Everyone is has this condition or whatnot, but the truth of the matter is, if you look back into history, we do notice that it was first brought to the public's attention in the 1900s, and it was known as defective moral control. Between 1930s and 1940s, there were studies by Werner and Strauss, and they didn't really add much more research to it, but it slowly did turn into being known as Strauss syndrome. So from there, we have William Cruikshank, who in the 1950s established the first school for students with ADHD and ADD. And then finally, in the 1980s, that is where they found that inattention did not all students with attention challenges had hyperactivity. And so that is where kind of that dual two different diagnoses came into place. So ADD, attention deficit disorder, and then ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So they really wanted to make that very clear. So again, there's three different types. There's ADHD, which is predominantly inattentive type. There's actually that should say ADD, predominantly inattentive type. Then there's ADHD, which is predominantly hyperactive, impulsive type. And then there is ADHD combined. And so combined means that the student has inattention and is also impulsive and hyperactive. Okay. We were going to do this activity, but I'll see if maybe we can do it another day, because it is a lot of fun. When we're looking at someone with attention challenges with ADD or ADHD, what we're looking at, what we need to consider is that they have oftentimes memory challenges, and they often struggle with short-term active working and long-term memory. So I'm going to break it down, what these look like and how they're manifested in the classroom. Okay. If I were to ask you right now to memorize these words, and I would give you a minute, and at the end of that minute you would have to recite them, that would be an exercise of short-term memory. And so many of us, I think, throughout our lifespan have learned different either mnemonics or different strategies to remember lists that we just need right now to remember before moving on. And so many students, though, with attention challenges have a difficult time with their short-term memory. They don't have those strategies in place, and they often struggle. So you will notice perhaps they forget to take out a piece of paper when everyone has been instructed to do so, or write down the items for homework tonight, whatever it may be. That's short-term memory right there. Okay. Then we have actually, I put this in because I wanted to go a little more into that. Short-term memory is briefly registering new information that is used, stored, or forgotten. So what we like to say is that the short-term memory is more so like that box that you have on your desk where you put items that they may need to be filed, or they may need to be thrown away depending on whether or not you will need to use them later on. But it kind of just in the interim holds them in place. Okay. If I were to ask you to multiply 43 times 27 with a shoulder partner, and you were to instruct your shoulder partner how to solve that problem without writing anything down, then that would be active working memory at play. Okay. And again, the active working memory is, okay, now I have that information. Now I need to determine what to do with it. Okay. So I may need to save it for later. I may need to hold it right now. Active working memory is definitely that it's a lot of a cognitive load for students with attention challenges. You will see that if a student has active working memory challenges, they're often forgetful, or they may have a lack of hindsight, forethought. They oftentimes have challenges with time management as well. Okay, so a couple of different learning strategies to support challenges with attention. Really try to intersperse low interest or passive tasks with high interest or active tasks. So, for example, in our class, I will be lecturing for about 10 minutes or so before I have you guys break out into a group or do a think pair share or engage in some sort of activity. And that is done, one, it's best practice for teaching, but two, it really helps to kind of bring back the attention and give you kind of like a second chance at absorbing the information. um, it's also really important that to have our students continuously engaged, that you involve them in group lessons and lectures. Keep objectives clear, break up presentations with opportunities for students to respond. Embed movement breaks whenever possible. Okay, for short-term memory, help students create to-do lists and cross off after they are done completing that, or have them learn to highlight important written directions. Okay, for active working memory, where they have to try to retrieve information that they've had to store for later use, teach them using strategy instruction. Anything that will support to or anchor information that they can retrieve later on is all really great for them. Okay, now we also have students with attention challenges that have impulsive impulsivity challenges. And so when that is happening, we need to make sure that we are supporting their behavior. We want to shape their behavior. And we can do this through a variety of different ways. We can go ahead and provide them with self regulation strategies and basically teach them what, if I'm feeling this way, here is a potential solution that I can follow through with. So if I'm feeling wild, silly, or wound up, I can definitely take a deep breath and just slow, deep breaths, okay? Then also, one of the most powerful strategies that I have personally implemented with students with attention challenges has been a self monitoring checklist. And again, I'm taking the accountability piece from me and I'm placing it on them. And of course, it depends on, the maturity of the student, the grade level that they are in, but having them be accountable for their behaviors and having them reflect on their behaviors is a really great strategy because it helps them really think about their behaviors or at least try to slow down their actions and break them down. And then finally, there are behavior contracts. If you look on Google, you will see a plethora of behavior contracts that serve different purposes. Behavior contracts are definitely much more successful when you have strong parent school communication because parents can definitely reinforce any behaviors, positive behaviors, or they can chat about what didn't go right at school, and have the student think further about what can I do to do better tomorrow or whatever it may be. Okay. Again, in addition to behavior challenges, some students may need some sensory diets. They have sensory needs, so consider sensitivity to light, sounds, smells, or touch. And again, providing that consistent opportunity for movement and physical excursion. I can't tell you how, as someone who struggles with needing a lot of movement, when I have to sit in meetings that are just lasting, an hour or two, it almost feels like I'm going to break out of my skin. And so I try to self-monitor my movement. I try to, do the tapping and anything that would allow me to get my energy out because I'm definitely that kind of learner. um, Also, for students, again, with those attention challenges, another strategy is to have them preview the material beforehand or give them access to a one-page summary. We know that their attention is impacted and they may not have the stamina to sustain their attention for long periods of time to get the information needed from a text. This is where providing them with a quick summary overview can definitely help them in the long run. Okay, providing them also models of what the work should look like is another great strategy for students with attention challenges, because they may miss this information in the lecture, but if you have this kind of posted somewhere of, the steps to follow, they're going to be much more successful. Okay, now we are going to be moving on to another disability category. And like I said, we have here our high incidence, low incidence disabilities. We're actually going to focus on intellectual disability. Next, this upcoming Tuesday, we're going to focus on autism. But for the duration of today, we're going to focus on intellectual disability. Okay? So, intellectual disability. It was previously known as mental retardation, or MR. That no longer is the case. It's now identified as ID, or intellectual disability. And what we really need to focus on is the following: an intellectual disability is often diagnosed when the intellectual functioning of the student and their adaptive behavior are limited, and it occurs before the age of 18. Okay, I repeat, there are significant limitations in intellectual functioning and in adaptive behavior, and these two are present before the age of 18. All of these criteria, limitations in intellectual functioning, limitations in adaptive behavior, and the onset before the age of 18 should be met should be met by showing a discrepancy of two or more standard deviations below the norm. Okay, so if we're looking at the bell curve of standard deviation, and I'll show this next time in class, but there should be a discrepancy of two or more standard deviations. Now, there's every student with an intellectual disability is different, just like us. We all have very unique learning profiles. However, there are some common characteristics that have been found in people with intellectual disabilities. Some of those are difficulty in communicating efficiently and effectively. Alternate methods of demonstrating abilities and knowledge are needed for these students because they're not sometimes able to demonstrate through traditional, quote unquote, traditional means. There's an uneven learning pattern in all domains. One day they may have that information that they've learned, and then the next day or the next week it's no longer there. So again, there's challenges with keeping that information. They oftentimes have difficulty learning, maintaining, and generalizing tasks and skills. When we're looking at difficulty learning, maintaining, and generalizing tasks and skills, we're looking at the following. It's always best practice for students with intellectual disabilities to be taught within context. What do I mean by that? If you are going to have them practice, zipping up their backpack or tying their shoes, it should be done within the natural context of when that occurs, as opposed to in isolation. The reason why is because if you practice skills in isolation, then the student will have a difficult time generalizing those skills. And we know that students with intellectual disabilities, it can take them up to 500 exposures of one skill in order to be able to generalize it. So that's why it's always so important that we are always, whenever possible, teaching skills within context. Okay, students with intellectual disabilities oftentimes demonstrate difficulties with problem solving skills. So I had a student who he actually spilled the milk on his desk, and all his friends from class were like, "Oh, you spilled your milk," and they're trying to help. They're grabbing napkins, and I said, No. And I asked the student, I'm like, you spilled your milk. What do you think you should do now? And he points at the milk, and I'm like, you're right. It's spilling everywhere. What should we get to clean it up? And so he eventually looked at the napkins. I'm like, you're right. We need to get the napkins to clean it up. So many students with intellectual disabilities um, oftentimes struggle with problem solving skills. And then finally, in general, and this goes hand in hand with universal design for learning, these students need access to information in a variety of ways and a multimodal approach, whether it be tactile, visual, auditory, anything multisensory. We're giving them the opportunity to learn material in more than one way, and that is really effective for them. So, this is a list of common conditions that cause um, a student to be identified as someone with an intellectual disability. So, there's Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, hydrocephalus, Prader-Willi syndrome, Tay-Sachs disease, and then also environmental. Okay, we'll probably do this activity next time. This is a really great activity that I like to do with all my classes because it puts into context the importance of being able to teach skills within context. So let me skip through that. Okay, great. Now, what I would like to do right now is I'm going to show you this quick video. Actually, probably not. Let's do it. Let me see if it'll work though. I don't have the best luck with videos. Okay, think it will work. Let me see. I'm not sure what's going on with the volume.
Jesus Christ Superstar at the Hollywood Pantages Theater, October 29th and November 3rd.
California ranks 35th in the nation when it comes to employing people with disabilities, but a unique partnership here in Southern California is working to change that by providing young people the skills they need to enter the workforce. NBC4's Carolyn Johnson and photojournalist Jorge Diaz have this week's Life Connected.
This is where the magic happens.
21-year-old Eden Rapp is doing a job she loves, working at Kaiser Permanente South Bay Medical Center as an intern.
My favorite part of this rotation is being able to work hard at my task and being able to get it done.
Because she really does a great job and just always wants to do her best, wants to do it right, asks questions, and just has an energy that is so nice to be around.
Anthony Schmidt is learning what it takes to work in a stockroom.
Sometimes I work on expiration dates. Sometimes I take stuff out to the compactor.
Interns like Anthony and Eden are getting real-world experience at entry-level jobs through Project Search, a 30-week program that's a partnership with LA Unified School District, the nonprofit Best Buddies, and businesses like Kaiser. Ozzy Martinez is Chief Administrative Officer.
Today, over 80% of working-age Americans with disabilities do not have employment.
Something Kaiser is determined to change. They've joined forces with the National Organization on Disability and are committed to expanding Project Search to other Kaiser locations.
And they rotate through various departments depending on their interest, which I think is really important because the students allow us to really find a placement that really has an interest of what they would want to find a job in the future.
And in the past 6 years, more than 80% of Project Search interns here have received full-time jobs with benefits at Kaiser or elsewhere, including both Memo Guzman and Felipe Rosales.
I tried my best to work hard, and I was so happy that I got hired.
My dream was to be a custodian since high school.
A dream achieved thanks to the internship.
What's the best part about having a full-time job like this?
Like you get to help your family with everything.
He first started earning a paycheck and said that he's going to help his family pay for the rent. But before he does it, he's going to talk to the landlord and make sure that things get repaired first. So they really understand and learn, how the world works through these programs.
Gavin Marigliani is Assistant Vice Principal at Willenberg Career and Transitional Center, a 4-year program for special needs students after high school. This culinary arts lab is an example of a place that students can come to learn the skills they need for once they head out into the real work world. But learning the so-called hard skills is just part of the process here.
We can get students jobs out in the community, but statistics show that they lose that in the first year because they don't have those soft skills. So that's what we focus in on. Their daily living skills, their hygiene skills, how to interact with coworkers.
The nurses Eden works with marvel at her growth, and so does Eden.
What is your favorite part about this program?
My favorite part is putting smiles on people's faces.
It really has provided, a culture of caring that has taken us to such a better place.
Together, they're changing the course of their lives with a work ethic and commitment to the job that inspires everyone around them. Carolyn Johnson, NBC4 News.
Now, all of the interns are paired with job coaches, and it's a service they get for life. If you know someone who might benefit from this program or a business that would like to participate, please go to our website or app and search Project Search.
Awesome. So, really cool thing is that we have our own Project Search that just opened last year and here in Kaiser Woodland Hills, and they have 8 students currently attending that Project Search program. One of the big though indicators of whether or not they're going to be successful is that they need to be able to catch the bus or any form of transportation independently. So that is one of the qualifications for joining the program, that they need to be able to be as independent as possible in getting their own transportation, whether it's through access or through public transportation. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop here for 1 second.